Hi everyone! I hope you're all having a great week. This week, instead of starting with a palette, I started with a shape. So I drew some circles at the very top part of my painting with a pencil, and it's gonna be basically the beginning of a landscape, an abstract landscape at that. And this time I'm hoping to create more of a nighttime landscape. I'm going to be working mostly with my Decadent Pies palette and two colors in particular, blackberry and apple. First thing I do when I start my process, I wet the paper around the circles that I've created up above, and I'm going to then use the wash of blackberry to start darkening up the top portion of what I'll consider to be my sky. I'm painting around my center circle, so there will be paint everywhere, even in some of the outer rings that I created around the circle. But I want to keep the inner circle fairly light for now, because the idea is that I'm going to be working on a moon and an abstract moon. So I want to keep that the center of the moon on a relatively light. Later on in my process, I'll add some metallic paint to that circle in the center, and I'm not 100% sure how well the metallic paint will cover this darker color, so I'm trying to keep that circle light for that reason. After adding my initial wash of blackberry, I go in again with some more color, and this time I dilute the color much less so that the outer rims of my quote-unquote sky will be a bit darker. Now, it's always good to keep in mind that when we're working with watercolors, the colors will dry much later than they actually appear when you're applying them. So if you want to make it darker, you may have to go over the area a few times. I'm gonna do this a couple of times, but I'm not overly concerned about making the sky too dark. I let the upper portion of my painting dry, and now I'm gonna start working on the land part of the painting, if you will. And for that, I'm going to be using some apple and also some of that blackberry mixed with the apple. The Decadent Pies palette is one of my favorites, and I've used it a lot. That's probably why my blackberry is almost completely gone at this point. But I just want you to know that if, for instance, you do not have this palette, you don't really have to rush out and buy a new palette in order to be able to create this painting. If you had, for instance, a Payne's gray or a really dark blue and a light red in any other paint brand, you would probably be able to do much of what I'm doing right now. If, however, you were interested in buying yourself a new palette and this one appeals to you, I also want to tell you that there is a really nice gold in the palette as well. It's not showing in my palette anymore because I used all of it, so I need to get some more. But it is a really nice gold, and the other colors in the palette are also really good to use if you want to do watercolor portraits. They mix really well to create skin tones. As I've mentioned before, this color called apple is very much like a light red, and if you don't have either light red or apple, it's very similar to like a terracotta color, so like an earthy red, which would also work really well for creating this painting. As you can probably tell, I've decided to make my landscape a mountainous landscape, and so I'm using my apple to start creating those mountains, and I'm just basically brushing over the blackberry that was initially applied. And what is really cool here, what I like anyway, is that a little bit of that dry blackberry that's underneath the apple is starting to mix with the apple, and it's creating a grayish bluish brown that I really like and that I feel works really well for this type of painting. I'll continue to apply that apple color to the bottom portion of my painting, and since there's no blackberry on the bottom, it won't mix, it'll stay pretty much as the apple color, and I want to keep it like that because it is a beautiful color and I want to keep some of that in there. But in a little bit I'll add a little bit more of that dark blackberry, and you'll see that again it'll mix a little bit with the apple, and again it just creates these really cool shades of blue and red and gray, and anyway, colors that I really like, and it's kind of like a neat little discovery that I'm making as I'm painting. I had a feeling these colors would work well together, but they're surprising me pleasantly more than I thought they would. I've changed brushes, and now I'm just taking some water, plain water, and I'm doing a few different little strokes over top of the wet paint that's on the paper, and that's going to lift some of that paint away and create some little textures that I like. I'm feeling like my moon is just a little too bright, and I'm concerned that my metallic won't cover that white quite as much as I'd like it to, so I'm going to darken it up a little bit. I used some of that apple color mixed in with the blackberry, and I added just a tiny bit of blueberry in there to change the hue of the color. Just a tiny bit, and I'll cover that whole entire portion with my brush, but it's a very light wash, and it's not going to be very dark, but it's just going to add a little bit of color to the center, and I think this will be helpful because I do want to have a lighter center, but I don't want the center of the sky to be so bright because it is supposed to be a nighttime sky. So even though it's not going to be completely dark, I still don't want it to be full on bright. I've mentioned before in some of my previous videos that I don't always film my painting process the same week that I'm actually posting my videos to YouTube. And for this period of time in particular, where I'm getting ready to move to Maine and we're busy packing and doing all kinds of things, and I know that at the very end of September and the beginning of October I'm going to be even more busy, I'm really trying to relieve myself from some of that pressure from having such a busy schedule coming up, and I'm painting and taping a lot more than I normally would in order to have my videos posted ahead of time so that I can keep posting my videos and not miss, any of the weeks coming up. But it's currently September 7th, and this video will be posted probably on September 28th. And on September 10th, there's a full moon. So that was sort of why I was thinking about the moon and the full moon in particular, and I was inspired to create this painting for that reason. I let my background dry completely again, and now I'm coming back in with blackberry, and I'm going to create some more mountains. I just keep going in with more blackberry, and then I go back in with more water to try and blend some of that downwards. As I'm passing my brush downwards and the brush gets a little bit drier, it still has a tiny amount of color, and it's creating these interesting little designs that I really like. So I'm probably going to do a little bit more of that with my brush. And sometimes it's interesting not only to work with a lot of water, but to work with a brush that's a little bit drier, because the marks you'll make using a drier brush are also very interesting. I've let my background dry completely, and now I'm going to start working with my fountain pen. My intention is for this to be a landscape, so I'm going to keep adding elements that are reminiscent of things you would find in a landscape. And in this instance here, I'm just drawing some simple little shapes that are going to look like rocks. Coloring in between the shapes that I just drew in adds a little bit of contrast to that section of the painting, and it really helps to define each of the separate rocks. I'll continue working with my fountain pen for a little while longer, and I'll keep adding some different details to my landscape. One of the lines that I drew seemed a little bit wonky, and so I decided that I was gonna just color it in. That was just me following my intuition, and having made that decision to color in that line led to a decision to color in every other line. Not in any specific order, but I feel that this is a way to create some interesting detail and continue creating some contrast in the bottom portion of my painting. I'll add just a little bit of stippling using my black fountain pen, and then I'll move on to doing something different. Let's see how I can use my white pen to create yet more contrast and more visual interest to my painting. White really does add a nice element of contrast against that blackberry sky. So I'll add a little bit more white by adding some stippling in this area as well. I flipped my painting upside down, and now I'm going to start adding a little bit more black at the top portion of that second line of mountains. I'm ready to start adding details to my moon. you'll probably notice that I had added a silverish looking color. I'll get the exact name of it and put it in my video description. But it seemed way too light, and so I figured it would be better for me to go in and add this pearl gold. And what I'll do also, because this is also looking light, although, you know, it is a moon, so I don't want to make it too dark, I'm gonna keep this center portion of my moon that lighter color, and then I'm gonna go around the outer rim of the moon, and I'm going to use some star gold, and I just feel like this is going to work way better with the colors that I have in the painting, and it also is going to add a little bit more contrast to that top portion of the painting, which really needs it. Star gold is making a huge difference, and I'm liking it way better now. I was going to start dotting some more of that star gold in the upper part of my mountains, and then I decided to try something different instead, and I really like it. My moon needs just a few more details to make it look more interesting. So I thought at this point that my painting was finished, but the center of my moon, or the ring around my moon I should say, still wasn't sitting well with me. So I decided I needed to make some changes. And so I added a little bit more of that black that I added at the very top of that second line of mountains, and now I like it way better. Let's move in for a closer look. My painting is probably a whole lot more colorful than a moonlit landscape would typically be, but I love color and I just can't help it. And the way that apple and blueberry mixed together, oh, it seemed just perfect for this painting. Thank you for the inspiration, Mama Kila. And of course, thank you so much for making the time to join me on this journey. Wishing you all a wonderful week and happy creating!